Is South Africa losing the fight against racism? Is the notion that the country is engulfed by racial intolerance justifiable? How can the public help towards preventing and combating hate crimes and hate speech? How does the Human Rights Commission ensure that South Africans do not fight racism with racism? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Mpho Tsedu. Racism in South Africa has become arguably one of the most defining features of 2016. While initiatives by government departments, NGOs and civil society to combat racism continue, incidences of racial intolerance tell a different story. Addressing the media in Parliament today, Minister in the Presidency Jeff Radebe said, and I quote, "South Africans must condemn the detrimental influences such as the racist assault on Rethabile Mlotshwa, which only serves to harm our fellow South Africans and does not add to Ubuntu of the South African nation," close quote. But what will it take to defeat racism in all its forms? We are live, therefore you can call us and air your views. The numbers to dial 089-1104-210. But before we start today's show, let's take a look at this interview with Rethabile Mlotshwa.
I will never wish this thing to happen to anybody else. I will never wish. Really, it is not good. Just that I really can't bear the pain. I really can't bear the pain, so I can't wish it to happen to anybody.
Well, my guest today, Goshwell Brooks, is the communications coordinator for the South African Human Rights Commission, and Advocate Mthunzi Maka is the spokesperson for the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Gentlemen, let me welcome you to the show. Mthunzi, because you are here, I'm going to take advantage. Before we get into today's matter, there are two matters from the Constitutional Court. Firstly, the arms deal, the Constitutional Court is saying we're done with that.
Now, obviously, the Constitutional Court is the final arbiter on such matters, and therefore, when it has spoken, which means the matter is put to rest. And
what would be your response as the department? Do you welcome that?
Obviously, they were trying to get the Arms Deal Commission report reviewed, and they failed. And as such, we welcome such a decision to put the matter to rest.
And another matter, the DA's application for the ICC matter to be heard as well?
Minister was very articulate and eloquently put our position at The Hague in the general debate of the Assembly of State Parties at The Hague yesterday. And therefore, we still believe that we are on solid ground. And obviously, we've always felt that their application was premature and ill-advised, given the fact that they had not ventilated the matter in the other fora.
Okay, well, quite an experienced spin doctor there. Let me come to you. Let's talk about this matter. Which, I mean, everybody has been talking about, this poor guy who was forced into a coffin alive. He says, look, these two guys just apprehended me and they said I had stolen whatever it is, or I was a thief, assaulted me, and whatever.
Look, it's a very unfortunate situation, and again, it's scratched at a scab in a wound in South Africa dealing with racism. And I think on the face of it, society, the media, civil society, everyone is looking at this through those lenses and saying that this is an instance of racism. But apart from that, I think the other thing that we shouldn't forget is the fact that other constitutional rights have also been impacted. I mean, freedom and security of the person, Section 12, his dignity as a human being, Section 10. And this is where I think we need to take our hats off for the police as well as the NPA, is that the two people that were involved, the two perpetrators in this instance, have been brought in front of a court of law. They've been remanded in custody until the 25th of January. And the South African Human Rights Commission is not leaving it just at those criminal charges. What the South African Human Rights Commission is looking at doing in our Mpumalanga office is actually to take this matter to the Equality Court.
Well, the case is now only in court. What are the sort of charges that these gentlemen are going to face?
My understanding is that they are charged with assault with intention to do grievous bodily harm. And sadly, that's the only charge they are facing at this stage. But if we had the prevention and combating of hate crimes and hate speech bill passed into law, we would charge them with hate crime. But there would have to be evidence that would be proved beyond reasonable doubt that indeed the assault was motivated by their hatred for him as a black person, which would have then sustained that charge in the event that this bill that we're proposing would be passed into law.
How far is it?
Look, we published in the Government Gazette on the 23rd of October,
yes,
for public comment. But then it generated a lot of interest and from a lot of people. I was at the Media Monitoring Africa dialogue at VETS last week, Thursday. And a lot of complex issues and technical issues and inputs that they made. And then we motivated to the ministers to say, look, there's interest in this. And let's push the deadline of 1st of December to 31st of January 2017 for the public to make comments. And we also realized that the majority of victims are domestic workers, are farm workers, your people in the rural areas and the townships. So those people don't have access to internet and email, which is the only platform or form of obtaining these opinions at this stage. We thought, let's have dialogue with those people in their African or home languages, so that when it's a fine-tuned document, it talks to the issues that they raise. It's a reflection of their inputs and views, having experienced some of these incidents themselves.
Justice, you are in Uppington. Welcome.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for the call, Justice.
Thank you very much. Sir, do you know what, man? The issue of racism is a serious problem. Come to exactly to this small town, it's a serious problem, especially here in Northern Cape, where people are working in the farms and they are not informed, they don't know their rights, they can be chased anytime their bosses want. It's a serious problem. I can report there's a school there in Northern Cape next to, how to call it, it's Oliphant. That school they don't allow any black kids there. Actually, the whole they do, they increase the fees in order to not to allow the black kids in that school. I was there, it was in 2014. I even asked one of those, they said, no, these kids, let me say, I asked the principal, he said to me, it doesn't mean he doesn't want the black kids. It's a matter of the fact that the black community there, they cannot afford the school fees. Then I went back to the community and asked them, what is happening? He said, no. When we go there, they tell us that the school is closed. I mean, the school is full. Do you understand? It's a serious problem.
Okay.
Especially here in the small towns. Please, government, come to the small towns and help us. Our people are suffering.
Okay, Justice, thank you for the call. I'm going to pose this question to both of you, or I'll just request that you respond to this question, both of you. What happens, meanwhile, before this bill is passed into law? What happens, meanwhile, when somebody is treated like this young man who was put in this coffin?
So if I can come in on that one.
Yeah.
What Mr. Marga but he forgot to mention as well is that they've also been charged with kidnapping. So it's kidnapping and assault, GBH, or assault with intent to do.
They're not charged for anything that's got to do with racism.
No, I said charged.
Yeah.
And I think you've touched on a very important point. He said evidentiary, right? The evidence that we have in front of us. So on the one end, you have the two accused account, and they're saying that they found this gentleman on this property, wasn't supposed to be there. Theft, I think, was one of the allegations as well. On his, on the gentleman's side, he's saying, look, he was severely beaten, and he was put into this coffin, and threatened to be burnt alive in this coffin. So what the concern is that on the face of it, and I think for many South Africans, for many civil society organizations, everyone is of the opinion that this, and probably rightly so, that this is a racist incident. But the issue is that proving that it's a racist incident is the difficulty.
Okay.
So I think that the criminal sanctions and the charges that have been passed against them in this instance, if prosecuted properly, if aggravation is argued well, and Mr. Marga will be able to, as an advocate as well as a former prosecutor, would be able to tell you that that's what will bring these people to justice.
Okay.
Look, of importance is the fact that in the meantime, the only charge in other incidents that are not necessarily similar to this one. You can charge them with criminal injury, for example, in the Sparrow case, for example, if you use the kafir word against a black person, which is demeaning and derogatory. Even in the Constitution, it has a bearing on his, or it's a violation of his right to human dignity. You can then be charged with criminal injury. Obviously, if you are convicted in court, you'll have a criminal record. There's also a civil remedy that you can also sue that person civilly, but that's expensive, which is why in the bill itself, we are proposing that we as the state take over and criminalize it so that you don't have to go through all these expenses.
But would you say, as a commission, you doing enough to educate and, in fact, even protect these people in the farms, in the rural areas where they are subjected to this form of discrimination and harassment?
Well, just to give you an indication, obviously we're going through a transition period. We're having new commissioners brought into the commission.
Yes.
Our previous batch of commissioners, for example, did a lot of work, especially a lot of outreach work for farm workers. I mean, one of the biggest cases that appeared in front of the Constitutional Court dealt with farm workers that had emoluments, or what people ordinarily refer to as garnishee orders against their salaries, where people would literally not have a single cent left at the end of the month after working for a full month's worth of work because of the garnishee orders against them. So I think that, to say that we're not reaching out to the poor, that we're not reaching out to people finding themselves, that are the most vulnerable in South Africa, that find themselves in the rural areas, I think would be a misrepresentation of this. I mean, in fact, in this particular instance, once the commission knew who the people were that were involved, who is the the complainant in this particular matter, we're approaching him and we want to take this matter to the Equality Court, because I think that that's another step that we can take in this particular issue.
Are you doing that?
Yes, our provincial manager, if I'm not mistaken, from Mpumalanga, has been all over the media this morning talking about the fact that the next step is to obviously get this gentleman's consent to take the matter through to the Equality Court on his behalf. As soon as he consents, there's no reason for the Commission not to take this matter through to the Equality Court and see it all the way through. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue our discussion. This is question time. We'll be taking your calls 089-1104-210. What are your thoughts? What do you think about this particular case in Mpumalanga, there where this young fellow was forced into a coffin alive?
Make your house ultra homey with Macro's big festive season savings on appliances like Samsung inverter air conditioners now $8,599 each, save 2,000 Rand. A Philips air fryer and hand blender combo, get both for only 1,999 and save 1,000 Rand. And how cool is the Hisense 340-litre frost-free fridge for 5,999, save 500 Rand. Share in these and other big festive savings for home, for business, for life. Only at Macro, big on life.
It doesn't always make sense.
It's easy to ignore.
It's always asking questions. What if cars could drive themselves? What if we could drive on the moon? What if headlights were lasers? What if cars could run on water or even air?
It's called your imagination.
And if you listen to it,
Great things will happen.
it's what we do at Audi. It's what we call Vorsprung.
Macro is going big on festive season savings with high-tech deals like the new PS4 1TB slim console with Call of Duty and God of War 3, only 5,999, save 700 Rand. A Samsung 55-inch smart curved UHD LED TV for 14,999, save 3,000 Rand. And save 100 Rand on the new TomTom Touch activity tracker, now only 2,399. Share in these and other big festive savings for home, for business, for life. Macro, big on life.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. Before we continue with the show, let's take a look at what various political party representatives had to say about Rethabile Mlotshwa's incident.
Our main aim of coming here as the ANC tick was that we wanted to support him, show him our support as our member of the ANC. However, we are still surprised. 22 years of democracy, you still have got white people who don't want to tolerate that we are here, we are surviving, and those white people, they don't want to cooperate in such a way that they even forget that they stole our land.
Belongs to all who live in it. We are appalled by what happened here, what's going on in this case, where some lives are treated as if they do not belong in South Africa. As the DA, we are saying black, white, Indian, colored, South Africa is ours, and we need to unite and condemn such cases so that they do not carry on.
We are very worried that the police in this town have shown a lot of favoritism. First of all, they never put the perpetrators in custody when the case was reported. When the charges were laid, they didn't put them in custody, and these are serious charges: kidnapping, assault with intent on grievous bodily harm.
There are three political parties that were at the court yesterday. My guest today, Gashwell Brooks, is Communications Coordinator for the South African Human Rights Commission, and Advocate Mthunzi Maka is the spokesperson for the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Let's go to our callers on the line. Kuman.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity.
Yes.
Yes, my comment is that it's a pity. Hello, am I on live?
Yes, you are on air, Kuman.
Yes, my comment is that it's a pity that this person, these two people, there's no direct charge that's related to racism that they can be charged with. But now my comment is also on the private sector, because you experience a lot of racism in the private sector, where you find that, especially here in the Northern Cape, you come from a rural area and then you are qualified for the position and you are never ever getting any promotion, and you are overlooked when it comes to promotions. What can the government do to make sure that we are also protected? Because we experience a lot of racism also, whereby you find, while you are qualified to do your work, or you've been doing your work sufficiently for a long time, then they bring someone from a farm who is white, and they come and that person gets promoted and they get a very high position. So I don't know if there is something that the government or any advice that they can give to us people who are working in the private sector.
Okay, Kuman, thank you very much for the call, Kuman in Kimberley there. Well, there's a deal here that it will be handled by the Commission.
Yeah, and it really does make sense. And the reason for that is, of course, our mandate as set out in the Constitution is to protect and promote rights. Okay. And those rights are contained within the Constitution. And obviously there's other enabling legislation that then comes into play. But the important part is, I mean, if you listen to what he was explaining there, that's unfair discrimination on the basis of race, at least on the face of it. And obviously there has to be an inquiry into the merit of the case. Why is it that this particular person was overlooked for a promotion and another person was brought in from the outside, etc., etc. We can go through that particular
So you can assist people who have such complaints that I'm not being promoted at work and I think it's because I'm black?
So, I mean, look, I think the one thing that we need to understand is that there's various mechanisms, and it depends on what the actual violation is and what the actual issue is. And we'll have to obviously assess it on each particular case. We have mechanisms, and this is what I find so surprising about South Africa at times, is that we have these mechanisms in place to deal with these issues, both on a legal matter, or on a legal basis, as well as on a practical basis. There are forms of finding recourse through the labor law structures, whether it be the CCMA, the labor court, whatever those processes are. The South African Human Rights Commission obviously comes in when we look at specific human rights violations as based either through PAPUDA, alternatively the Constitution.
Jane, you are in Cape Town. Welcome.
Good day, Buko. I can say we are fighting racism, but I don't think we are pressing the right buttons. Because racism is increasing because the inequalities in South Africa is increasing. So if we say these white people who are racist, we put more laws. What we are just saying there is, don't speak, but you can still be racist inside you. So what we really need to fight here is not the laws and all that. Let's try to bridge this inequality, poverty, and see to it that the black people, the level of their life is increased. If it means we need
no, James, I'm battling to hear you, my brother. It seems that line is not well at all. If you're able, please do call us back. Let's hear what point you're trying to make there. But I think there's a concern out there that the law does not serve the poor. It may not be factual, but that's a perception out there.
Look, if you're talking broadly, then I have a problem with that, because if you cannot afford legal representation and you are facing charges, or you have a civil action to institute, Legal Aid South Africa's budget is sufficient, and they, quality control-wise, they are trained, they're very competent in discharging or in dispensing justice on behalf of the poor. But if you talk in instances where there are racial incidents, where farm workers or your domestic workers are racially abused, currently, yes, we don't believe that the legislation that is there is enough to address that, which is why, in terms of Article 5 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are obliged as a country to declare an offense by law for all forms of racial superiority, incitement, advocacy of hatred against any group, which is why it's important for this bill to come into play. And you will recall that last week there was the Kruger case of SARS employee who had used the word kafir on his colleagues, in fact against his supervisor. And now Chief Justice Mkhweng put it clear that as a concern, that why is it that there is an escalation of racial incidents or acts, yet none of these are met with a fittingly sustainable and a firm disapproving response. And this is a disapproving response by government to say, let's talk, let's debate and see if there's a need for this hate crimes and hate speech bill. We are not saying it will end racism, but we're saying it will act as a deterrent and train people and educate them to be more sensitive in their interaction with people of other racism.
Okay, is it Chipiwa or Chisiwa?
It's Chipiwa.
Chipiwa.
Yes.
Farero Amanda. Yeah, welcome.
Yes, the point that I want to raise here is the situation in which we find ourselves in as a country. I'm coming in for what happened exactly for some few months or last month, where the guy was, abused in that cruel way. What I'm saying, we still have a lot of work to do as a country. You go to Lutricia at Makado, you can attest that there are a lot of racial segregation that's happening in that country. I'm saying at where we are now as a country, we are 22 years old, but we are still finding people being treated in such a manner. And one can say, with due respect, our justice system must really tighten its glove in order for them to deal with this such of barbaric behavior, because it's really an ISO situation to stand aside and look, while especially as African people, with due respect to the so-called white, but the way in which they are treating us, it is very, very, very uncalled for, and it's an ISO situation which we need to drastically, come in and deal with it. We cannot just stand aside, for how long, if I may ask. It's very an ISO situation indeed.
Okay, Chipiwa, thank you very much for that. Gentlemen, we've run out of time, but I'm going to give you concluding thoughts there. Let me start with you.
Well, I should say it's a shame to see that that incidents based on race are increasing in South Africa, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, if you think about the social media, greater access, people being able to, it seems that the filter disappears when people get onto Facebook or whatever. And the unfortunate thing is that there's that escalation. But I think one thing that we should keep in mind is that this democracy wasn't built on legislating away racism, but rather to foster a coexistence amongst ordinary South Africans.
Of importance is the fact that in your exercising your constitutional entrenched right to freedom of expression, you must know that there are limitations, and therefore, justifiably so, we will limit those because there's also right to human dignity. And as they say in law, let justice be done though the heavens may fall. So we will make sure that there's justice that is dispensed whenever this bill, when its law is contravened.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was question time for today. A big thank you to my guests and to you for watching the show. From me and the crew, you have yourself a wonderful time. Ibe Khotso.